Hello, bonjour, monsieur and mademoiselle. Might have butchered my French, but pardon my French. I don't know anything about French, except a few words which people may find offensive. Here we are in Circuit Paul Ricard. Contrary to popular belief, I actually like this circuit, alright? I really like the flow of it, not necessarily, the run-ups and all. I really like the flow of the corners, high speed, a lot of direction change. It's sort of high speed technical circuit. You wouldn't really expect that much nowadays, but it's a good track to race on, at least in the game. In real life, I think with the new cars, it's pretty nice to race as well. Sadly, we won't be getting French GP next year in F1 2023. Quite ironic, because you have the Alpines with two French drivers, entire French lineup, French team, no French GP. Boom! But we can do some magic in the game. Now, setup. How do you set up your car for France, for a career mode race? Maybe a league race, which mostly what I do. Is how we're gonna go. Now, you can rewind the whole video to see how I break into each corners. I'm not really gonna go into like a full in-depth corner by corner analysis because I'm not the best around here. There's other creators around which you can always search for, like in-depth track guide. Go look them up. They're very good in what they do, and I'll just teach you how to do setups. That's all. That's my best thing. Now let's go back to the garage and take a look at the setup that we have here, the custom setup that I made compared to the world record setup. Now let me just quickly save this bad boy before I forget to do it again. Kind of had a setup previously, but I forgot to save it. Luckily, it wasn't too different from the world record setup. Now, France is a deceptively high-speed track. All right, you may think you need a lot of cornering speed, which you do. Yes, this will help you in sector 3, especially where it's in the twistiest part of the track. But if you are trying to overtake someone or trying to defend from someone, having too much downforce is going to bite you. They're going to easily overtake you, or they're easily going to be able to defend from you, even if you're faster through sector 1 and the slow speed stuff in sector 1 and sector 2, wherever the slow corners are. Chances are with low downforce you will survive the straights. You can hold them up. The only problem is, lower downforce always comes with more tire wear. One way you can offset low downforces high tire wear is by increasing the tire pressures, which is also a problem in this game, especially since whatever patch they decided to fix the tire temperatures. Now if your tire temperatures exceed 100 degrees Celsius, they start to lose performance at first, and when they exceed 104 105, that's where you get severe understeer or severe oversteer. Right, on the front you get a lot of understeer. On the race, if they're overheating, they'll get a lot of oversteer. So you have to keep your tires in check, and at the same time, you want to be straight on the straights. It's all about carrying the momentum through the corners. That's what I found in France here. If you can carry good amount of speed, not necessarily the fastest around the corner, but if you can just maintain a good momentum through the corners, hit your apexes, and then get on power just nicely. If you're within 4 5 6 tenths of someone, then you have a good chance of overtaking them with your lower aero setup. And of course, if you're smooth with your driving, you're not going to be bothered about the tire wear, because if you have higher pressures, with your smoothness, they are going to help you. Now let's jump into the setup quickly. Enough of babbling. The world record setup had a 1614 wing. I just went low. Why not? Because that's still okay. One click of downforce, one click low on downforce will give you about maybe 1 kph extra on the straights. And well, in qualifying it doesn't matter that much. In a race though, it's going to be helpful, especially on the Mistral straights, to overtake someone. Other than that, I think it's almost the same. Now if you have a bit of understeer into corners, let's say you're trying to turn in, it's just not turning in, and then the long corners in seniors and whatever, you're trying to turn in, and it's not turning in. Chances are, if you're running this setup, if you have that problem, probably you're not taking enough speed, or you're taking too much speed into a corner on entry. So try to compromise your entry so that you get better exits. But if all that is done and fixed and you still feel you're slow, you need more cornering on the front, increase the front wing. That's a good solution. If you feel everything is good, you want to start lowering the downforce so that you be better on the straight line speed, you start by reducing the rear wing. Rear wing generates a lot more drag than the front wing. So if you're trying to get a bit of straight line speed, well, rear wing is your first choice to get rid of. Right, front wing you can always adjust in the pits. That's the most important thing. So you want to make sure your rear wing is at the correct level, that you don't have to compromise anymore. 15-13 is where I start. In the race, actually, you can always go one click higher at the start of the race with heavy fuel, hard tires, even on medium tires. I like to go a little higher, one click higher, just so I look after my front tires. And generally, at the start of a race, the car is a bit sluggish, so it's harder to turn into corners, harder to brake. You sometimes might miss your braking points. So having that extra bit of downforce on the front will help the car to, well, drive like you want. And then once you go into the pits, drop by one click or two clicks, whichever you like, so that your car is again balanced on lower fuel, and at the same time you get some straight line speed boost in the second half of the race. That's a good thing to have. Transmission, 55 or 60 on the front is both okay to use around here. I used 55 just now, although the setup was starting at 60. 55 is just nice. The rule of thumb on how to know what is a good differential to use: on slower corners you want higher differential so that you get better exits. On high speed corners you want lower differential, so that lower on throttle differential, correction, so that your car rotates more, doesn't have understeer on high speed. Off throttle, it's kind of the opposite. In slow speed you want it lower so that your car can turn in, be a bit more nimble in the corners. The car is easily turning into the corner. On high speed you want it higher so that the car doesn't snap, or doesn't be out of balance when you're taking high speed corners, when you lift off or you just turn into a corner, whatever. But it generally helps to keep the car more stable. But in the game you can run 50 in all tracks. For off throttle you'll be fine. If you feel the rear is sliding out a lot, it's helpful to raise it to 51 in tracks like this, Silverstone, Austria, and Spa even. There's a lot of high speed corners where on low downforce you might struggle to keep the rear in check. On throttle, the lower you go, possibly is better, more consistent traction. But if you go too low, like 50, when you go on traction, especially in the lower speeds, in lower gears, it is going to cause more oversteer, surprisingly, right? And the fix to that is just go higher on the on throttle. 55 or 60 will be just nice to use. All right, suspension geometry, right, left, minimum camber, minimum toe. That's going to keep the car very stable. At the same time, it is marginally quick on the straights because it generates less drag this way. All right, I'll go into that in the deep dive of my whatever big old setup series that I've still yet to put out. It is coming finally this weekend after the Abu Dhabi race has been concluded. One day each is going to explain every bit of the setup. There you go. Suspension, the world record setup ran a 2.142. okay, not much different here. It's all about suspension page. It's more of getting the car to feel the way you want it. All right, the wings are going to give you the majority of your lap time, but the suspension is going to help you to achieve the feeling that you want in the car. Now, what I found with this, the world record setup, was this was a little too pointy. That means the car was turning in too much for my liking. Again, we're not esports drivers here or whatever. We're just casual drivers. We have our own preferences as well. The car was a little too pointy. That means it was turning in too much, especially in mid corners, in slower corners. The car was turning in too much, and on the exit when I put down the power, it starts to slide because it's a bit soft on the suspension setup here, and the rear is on 2. When you go higher on the rear anti-roll bar, it helps the car to turn in quick direction change, which there are plenty of in this track, but it also causes instability in the rear. General rule of thumb for this game: just set your rear suspension to 1, rear anti-roll bar to 1. You'll be perfect in all tracks. Play around with the front suspension and front anti-roll bar. Front suspension, if you have entry understeer, reduce it. If you have entry oversteer, increase it. Okay, if your car is, let's say, too bumpy on the curbs, like if you take a curb, certain curb, maybe in the mid corner, and you feel the car is just bouncing a lot, try going one click lower. It might help. Anti-roll bar, you'll feel the effect more in the middle part of the corner, like the mid cornering phase, as you're trying to turn the car more and more. You already turned into the corner on the entry, but in the mid corner you're trying to get the car rotated. If you have understeer, like while trying to change direction real quick, especially the Mistral chicane, I call it, between the two straight, the chicane. If you have like trouble getting the car from left to right real quick, the change of direction, you can try to reduce the anti-roll bar. But I had a problem of it was turning in too much for me, so that's why I went higher. Doesn't mean it's going to generate understeer, it's just going to help the car to not move as much in those sequence of corners. And it also helped me throughout sector 3, where the car did not turn in too much, and when I put down the power, it's a bit more stable. That's how I wanted it. Now ride height, how can I say, the higher you go on the front, it's going to increase your top speed, but at the same time increasing your front ride height will cause understeer. All right, contrary to somewhat like real life, but in real life, the higher you raise your ride height on the front, the more downforce you lose in the car. In the game, you can still get away by increasing your front ride height. You don't lose much downforce out of it. Surely it's a true thing. If you reduce your front ride height, your car is going to be more agile in cornering, so you'll feel, you can see the car itself physically, like more glued into the corner. It will turn in where you point it and it immediately turns in. Now if that's too much of pointiness for you, if the car turns in too much, you can always try to increase the ride height, but I wouldn't really recommend using this as a way to balance out the car. Just use it at the end if you need a bit more fine-tuning. Rear ride height, I'd say, is more important than the front, because if you go too low on the rear, well, it might just help on slow speed exits, but it's going to cause you a lot of oversteer on high speed corners, because when your car is too low, this is your car, this is the front, this is the back, say if your car is sitting too low to the track, it's going to cause you some oversteer on exit, because it just scrapes the floor, no downforce going to the rear diffuser, your car is going to spin. That's why you see we raise the ride height a little bit. 4 is just nice here. 3 is not recommended, but if you can manage it somehow, go for it. 5 is preferably the number you want to be at. World record setup is also using 7.4 anyway. So 7.5 will be a bit safer, so that when you go through high speed corners, CNAs and sector 3, your car is a bit more stable on the rear. As you put down power, you're not gonna have any, you'll have less chance of the car trying to kill you. That's what I'm trying to say, right? That's the suspension for you. Brakes 150, keep it the same. You did notice, I think, did I or did I not use 51 into the braking zone in the middle sector, right, between the two straights. I sometimes like to try 51 in heavy braking zone, just so the car doesn't over rotate into the corner. So 51 might be helpful in heavy braking, especially if you want to try to outbrake someone on the inside to make an overtake. So you want to make sure your car is stopping. 51 will be good. Don't go any higher, because then you'll just overshoot your corner. 50, 51, just nice. Tire pressures. World record, it's using 2 clicks and then maximum on the rears for both rear tires. That's because in time trial, there's no temperature effect. You don't really get the tire wear effect at all, so it helps stability. Higher rear pressures will help the car stability in high speed. Lower will help in slow speed exits and slow speed cornering. You want to find a balance. Generally in this game now, you run only about 2 or 3 clicks at most. Alright, on the front tires, start with the minimum, because they will overheat a lot in the race. For the race, you can run the same. If you're smooth with your inputs, if you've done some practice, you know where is the limit, then you can always go lower or higher. But if you've not done any practice, you're just jumping in straight in for a race, I'll recommend just starting at minimum tire pressures for fronts, because otherwise they're going to overheat and you will not have pace. Reality of fronts. But either way, you set it to 3 clicks on the rear is just where I'm happy with the car's balance. It turns in nicely in slow speed, and on high speed it's somewhat balanced. It's just nice for me. So it's all about personal preference. Setup, let's recap it real quick. 15-13 on the wings. If it's gonna rain, just go 5 clicks or 10 clicks higher on each, you'll be fine. Maybe 5 clicks on each, 5 or 8 clicks, 10 clicks on each wing. If it's going to be a mixed condition race, possibly consider starting like 2 or 3 clicks higher than the current setup that we have. That's going to help you to be quick in the wets, survive the wets if anything. A 55 50 or differential, that's good. Right, left, left, keep it the same. 2-1 on the suspension, 6-1 on the anti-roll bars, 7-4 on the right height. Now we have a bit of problem on corner entry. If the car turns in too much and you feel like the car is just too pointy, you don't want to change the aero, you can always increase the front suspension by 1. If your corner entry is okay, but mid corner it turns in too much, you feel, and on power the car just slides a bit, yeah, go higher on the front roll bar. Don't go too high, otherwise you'll generate a lot of understeer and slow speed, so you want to keep it somewhat balanced. Brakes always the same, and tire pressures start with minimum all tires if you want jump in blindly into a race. Otherwise you can try something like this, right? That's it for fronts, and well, we'll be back very shortly, possibly in less than half a day even, for Abu Dhabi setup. Why? Because yes, it's the finale in the F1 22 season and Sab is retiring. Sab, good old man. So we'll be driving the Aston Martin, maybe. Let's see how the car looks, and we'll be back for Abu Dhabi later today. Till then, take care, stay safe, bye bye.